Yeah. Very good morning to all of you and those who have been waiting for a long time. Thank you for your patience. I, Dr. Sutishita Das, IQAC Coordinator of THK Jain College, welcomes you all to the national webinar on Indian economy in post-COVID-19 prospects and challenges. Organized jointly by the Department of Economics in association with IQAC. Today we have 2 eminent listeners and are eagerly waiting to hear from them. Someone microphone has to be muted. Please mute your microphone, sir. We must thank you all for showing such interest to participate in this webinar, as we have received huge response. We are really thankful to all of you. One humble request from us that kindly do mute your microphone and switch off your camera, and kindly do not share or present any screen. This is very much required for an uninterrupted session. Please, if possible, please switch off your microphone and your video. And do not present anything, because that would disturb the presentation of the speaker. We have 3 sessions: the welcome session, the technical session, and the valedictory session. And we'll begin the welcome session. And with this, I'd like to request our respected Principal Madam, Dr. Moshmi Singh Sengupta, to say a few words and introduce our respected guests. Over to you, Madam.
Good morning, all. It is my privilege to welcome everyone to this national webinar, organized by the Department of Economics and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Taradevi Bharatchan Kankaria Jain College, which is popularly known as THK Jain College. The THK Jain College, it is a self-financed minority institution which is affiliated to prestigious University of Calcutta and run under the auspices of Sri S.S. Jain Sabha. I would like to offer my special welcome to Sri CMA N. Rabindranath Kaushik, today's speaker, and who is from Bengaluru, and Dr. Mohananda Kanjilal, who is an associate professor, Jogesh Chandra Chaudhuri College, Kolkata, chairperson of our session. So, let us first introduce Sri CMA N. Rabindranath Kaushik, who is a cost accountant in practice. He has 11 years of industry experience and 9 years of professional consultancy experience in area of GST, direct taxes, project consulting, and academic training. He is a resource person with Fiscal Policy Institute GOK, resource person with Higher Education Academy, Ministry of Higher Education, GOK, and resource person with National Dairy Development Board, GOI. He was the past chairman of Bengaluru chapter of Cost Accountant for the session 2018-19. He has also been nominated by IUB to represent in Regional Advisor Committee of Central GST. He is a fellow member of Institute of Cost Accountants of India and has MPhil degree in economics and also holds postgraduate degrees in taxation, economics, and finance. He has been awarded with SARAC Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018 from PMT. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation to join us to this national webinar. Now let us introduce, Dr. Mohananda Kanjilal Madam, who has been a professor in economics and presented papers in many national and international seminars. She is from the Jogesh Chandra Chaudhuri College, which is affiliated to prestigious University of Calcutta.
Madam, your voice is not coming clear. Madam, your voice is not coming clear.
You can hear me now? Hello? You can hear me?
Yeah, better.
You can hear me?
Yes, ma'am, better. And kindly again, all of you, please mute your microphone.
The noise is coming. Background noise is there.
Yes, ma'am, your voice is much clear now.
Okay. So let me continue. Dr. Mohananda Kanjilal, she's presented papers in various national and international seminars in institutions of repute, both in and outside country, like Bamberg and Cobalt Universities, Germany, and IUSS University, Tokyo, Japan, and many others. Dr. Kanjilal has another identity of being an excellent Kathak dancer and choreographer. She has worked as educational and cultural ambassador of India in Germany in 2010. She is associated with various TV channels as economic panelists. So today we are very fortunate to have these two research persons in our national webinar organized by Department of Economics and IQAC of THK College. Now, at this time, that our economics department has come up with the topic of the national webinar, which is important relevance in this time of economic crisis. Not only during COVID-19 pandemic, but also when the whole country is strained with various natural disasters like super cyclone, as it happened in case of West Bengal, and Nisha in Mumbai, and many others, earthquakes, etc. So I think all these have definitely an impact in Indian economy, which is today's focus of discussion. So once again, I welcome our today's guest and all the participants to this national webinar. And I am thankful. I express my immense thankfulness to all the guest speakers and honorary chairperson of the session. I am requesting our departmental head, Professor Niloy Gupta, who is head of economics department, to take over the session and to start our technical session. Niloy, you are there?
Thank you, madam. Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, madam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
A very good morning to today's speakers, sir. N. Rabindranath Kaushik, Chairperson Madam Dr. Mohananda Kanjilal, our Principal Madam Dr. Mousumi Singh Sengupta, my esteemed colleagues, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would start my lecture with two small stories. Rohit, 29 years old, a mason from Bihar, used to work at construction site in Delhi. He has two sons. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello.
Please use your microphone. Please speak. Please be present. So, Niloy, you
Hello,
continue.
can you hear?
Be loud.
Okay, Rohit, 29 years old, a mason from Bihar, used to work at construction site in Delhi. He has two sons. He lived in a small rented room in Delhi with his wife. In the first 2 weeks of lockdown, he anyhow managed, but after that, he was forced to vacate the room. Electricity and water supply were disconnected by the landlord. He said, quote, I didn't know who to ask for help or who to beg from, unquote. Mr. Util is a temporary lecturer in a college in Bengal. As college remains closed, so now to survive, to save his family, he works as a mason in village at rupees 150 per day wage. It is not the story of Rohit or Ukil, it is the picture of most of Indians. Since the lockdown, millions of migrants, casual, temporary, informal workers have lost their jobs. Many of educated peoples have also lost their jobs in India. COVID-19 is destroying the lives and the livelihoods of vast informal workers in India. ILO, in its report published on March 18, described COVID-19 as, quote, worst global crisis since World War II. In India, to combat with negative economical effects of COVID, our Honorable Prime Minister announced the fiscal stimulus package, which is 10% of our GDP. Later on, Honorable Finance Minister had elaborately described the said package with special focus on MSME sector. According to CMIE, as on 5th June 2020, India's unemployment rate was 22.1%. IMF in its report on 15 April 2020 slashes India's growth forecast to 1.9%. Fitch Solution also cuts India's growth forecast for financial year 2021 to 1.8%, saying private consumption is likely to contract due to large-scale loss of income. High rate of unemployment and low growth could make the economy more uncertain. Government took several policy measures in the package in order to facilitate the availability of liquidity. Government assured us that this package would make India Atmanirbhar. But the question of the hour is, will the package affect economy immediately, or excessive care on supply side measures solves the problem of lacking demand of the economy, or how do we rescue the ship of informal economy from sinking down further? Or can the policymakers solve the problem of uncertainty? Can India once again raise its growth? Or what would be the direction and move of Indian economy in post-COVID pandemic? Considering all such questions, the Department of Economics of THK Jain College, Kolkata has organized this national webinar on Indian economy in post-COVID-19 prospects and challenges. The department has in past several times successfully organized seminars and solo lectures on different issues in economics by the excellent speakers from different parts of India. On behalf of the department, I am happy to share within 2 days, over 1900 participants registered in this webinar across the country. I am very much optimistic, so I do hope that Indian economy will shine in near future in spite of having so many issues. So I would end my lecture with a quote of Helen Keller: "Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence." I am confident that your full support and cooperation will make this program a great success. Thanks to all. Now I would request our today's chairperson, Madam, to conduct the session. Over to Dr. Kancila. Thank you to all.
Very good morning. Welcome to the webinar organized by THK Jain College. Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me?
Yeah, ma'am. We can hear you.
Ma'am. I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to this webinar organized by THK Jain College, Kolkata. First of all, I would like to thank Principal Madam Moshni Sengupta Sinha and the Department of Economics, IQAC and the technical team of the college for arranging this needful webinar. And I also welcome the speaker of this webinar, Sri N. Rabindran Kaushik, Cost Accountant Rabindranath Kaushik and Associate Secretary. Now, the topic of this webinar is, you all know that Indian economy in post-COVID-19 prospects and challenges. Now, we all know that coronavirus and COVID-19 has created a pandemic throughout the world. And we are also not exception. We are facing the same problem. But apart from the serious health-related issues and many government methods to control the pandemic, another significant shock has arisen on the economy of the country, creating an unprecedented crisis due to lockdown. Now, there is no doubt that like governments of any other country, Indian government, both central and state, are facing tremendous pressure in all respects. Now, several issues are coming out. For example, decline of production, employment during lockdown periods, continuous decline in the growth rate of the country, GDP. Predictions are coming that growth rate may turn out to be negative. And in the meantime, the central government has also announced some packages. Now, so today, I hope we will try to cover all these issues. But first, I would like to request our speaker, Sri Rabindranath Kaushik, to forward this discussion. But first, let me tell you again the ground rules of the webinar. Please keep mobile phones in mute mode for smooth functioning of the webinar. And already Principal Ma'am said, but I'm just repeating that we have divided this webinar in 3 sections. The first one, welcome address. Second one, the speaker, our respected speaker will give the speech and The third section, the concluding session, will be the questionnaire session, where we can discuss different issues relating to Indian economy, the challenges, the prospects, and I'm very much hopeful that crisis will come, and it has already appeared in previous years also. In 2008 also, Indian economy faced severe economic crisis, and therefore it will come, and this crisis we can of course overcome. We will be hopeful, and therefore these discussions are very much need of the hour. So now I would request our honorable speaker, Sri Ravindranath Kaushik, to carry forward this discussion. Thank you.
Good morning to one and all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Yes,
Good morning,
sir.
madam.
You are not-
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for Principal Madam and the Chairperson of today's national webinar, Dr. Mausi Singh Sengupta, for giving a beautiful introduction. And I would also like to thank the Chairperson of today's national webinar, Dr. Mahananda Kanjilal Madam, for giving a brief overlook of the present situation, what we are into in the COVID-19. And I would like to even thank IQAC Coordinator, Sushmita Rao Das. Sorry if I'm not able to spell your names properly, because I'm from South India. I have a problem with spelling name of Bengalis.
Yes, sir. Dr. Das is okay.
Okay, fine. And of course, my friend who is behind me for last 15 days, he's following it with me, Saptarshi Chakrabarti. So, having said so, it's a very great moment for me to see almost around 248 people who have joined this session at this point of time, and another 238 people are still in the process of joining this session. So I think this is a great opportunity for me, especially to deliver the talk today on a very important topic. This is my 25th session which I am conducting nationally and internationally on this particular topic. And every day I talk about this topic, right? 1 hour, few pages will be there in my presentation. So I don't have any presentation as such. I don't carry any PPTs. I'll be just sharing my thoughts and views on this particular situation, what is prevailing and what will be the future for India. So I'll be focusing more on that, and not having any presentation. I'll be making more from practical aspects what things looks like today in the world. Having said so, the first and foremost thing is it's not appropriate now to call post-COVID, because we don't know when the post-COVID situation will arise. Still, we are in the peak stage of pandemic now. It's already crossed more than 2.5 lakh cases, and still the numbers are going up. Every day we are, on an average, we are finding 10,000 cases which are coming out in India, that too carrying out at a test with a very lowest rate compared to the global standards. So I think this post-COVID, even I am not sure when the post-COVID will be. I presume that the situation may continue for next 8 to 10 years, 8 to 10 months, or the present situation, what is that we need to live with this COVID. That is the final conclusion, what even the government is also telling. Instead of thinking about post-COVID period, better we stay with this virus, and let us learn how to stay with this virus with more safety and more carefully. Having said so, if you open today's India's New Indian Express newspaper, right, there is a big article which has been carried out by World Bank reports. So when you see that article, the World Bank has given some scaring figures saying that this is one of the worst recession which India or the world is going into. Rather than India, I will be talking from the world per se initially. So the World Bank has observed that this will be one of the worst recession which the world will be entering into since 1870. That is, this is the 14th recession which is taking place from 1870 onwards. And this is one of the worst recession it will be. That's what the World Bank observation is. And it has projected that the entire advanced countries, their growth rate will come down by 7%, and overall GDP of the world will come down by 5.2%. So this is what the World Bank projections are, and they have carried some more statistical figures which are really worrisome. And let us be of the impression that this is not only something which has been affecting India as such, it's the global phenomena, it's a pandemic which is creating shock in the entire world. So, let us not too much worry about the figures, because the numbers are not important for us as of now. So, whatever the growth rate, negative growth rate they are projecting, and whatever the fiscal deficit they are showing, all these things, let us not be so serious about that, even though it's a matter of concern. But it's better not to look into those figures, but because these are the figures which is happening across the globe. So it's not only happening only to India, it is en masse, it's happening across the globe. Even the richest of the richest country and far advanced countries are also coming under this particular panorama of recession. So let us not too much worry about the numbers, what the international agencies are giving or some of the rating agencies are showing over a period of time. But what is for India and what it looks for India is something which is very important. So first of all, let me start from the positive note of where we are standing today, especially in terms of factors. So when I talk about the foreign exchange reserve, today India is very comfortably placed in terms of garnering the foreign exchange reserve, which has closed day before yesterday at $493 billion. So we have a huge foreign exchange reserve of $493 billion, which can cater to the next 1.5 year trade deficit of India. That's what the predictions are. And we are comfortably placed in terms of having the reserves of dollar with us, which is a very important factor in order to monitor the fluctuation in the currency rates. The second important factor which we need to look into is the food security. So in spite of this so much of impact of COVID, and the entire nation came into standstill because of the 4 lockdowns announced by the central government in order to prevent the further destruction of the virus into the society. We have not come across any single issue of starvation death. That is, food security is which was the haunting issue in India has been addressed now. As per the Food Corporation of India statistics, we have enough surplus of food grains, oil seeds, pulses, and also oil, which can cater to the demand of Indian consumers to the next 8 to 9 months. This is tremendous thing which has happened in the recent years, where we have become self-sufficiency in food grains and food crops also. So India is comfortably placed. So nothing to worry about what I call it as food crisis, or in terms of the poverty elevation activities and all those things. India has been comfortably placed in those terms also. That is a second very positive indicator which is working out for India. The third positive indicator which I want to talk about is on the stability of the rupee when compared to dollar. So today rupee is trading at 75.45 and 75.65. That is the average rate at which the rupee is trading compared to dollar. So we are comfortably placed compared to countries like China and Japan, where the devaluation of currency has taken place at a very faster rate compared to India. So China, which holds almost 80% of US dollars in different forms, still it is facing difficulty in order to maintain its currency metrics in terms of dollar terms. But in India, we have been placed at a very comfortable stage where our rupee is not becoming more volatile compared to dollar. This is one of the strongest things which we can say that India has a very positive outlook in the coming years, especially in terms of trade-related items. The fourth important factor which I want to highlight upon is the inflation. You know what is the circumstances and the consequences, what the inflation will create in the society. So, today we have been placed in a very comfortable situation when it comes to the question of monitoring and controlling the wholesale price index and consumer price index. So, in spite of the 3 months of lockdown and economic activity not taking up it to the shape what it was expected to have done, still we have a comfortable position of managing and controlling the inflation at the level what it should have been done. So this is one of the important factor which needs to be thought of, especially because of which the RBI has come up with lot of policy measures and pushing more liquidity to the system has engained lot of credits, especially in terms of addressing the MSME sector with fund. This is one of the important factors which we should not forget, where India is still doing very good inflation. The next very important factor is, of course, the stock market. So I think those people who are very crazed in stock market investment and all those things, it's the right time for many people to enter into the market because the market is very bearish now. So, seeing the figures of latest investment done by the foreign institutional investors as well as domestic institutional investors, the latest concluding figures of yesterday shows that $1.7 billion has come into the markets from foreign institutional investors and $1.5 billion has come from domestic institutional investors into the market. So, after the 3 months of continuous fall in the market, today we are seeing that the NSE has crossed more than 10,000 psychological barrier points and the BSE 50 has crossed more than 34,000 points. This is something which shows that there is enough confidence in the investors, as the chairperson was rightly pointing out that the optimistic mood, what is very important in such type of situation. I think the market is behaving to that type of situation by showing that the markets have gone up consecutively in the last 4 or 5 days of trading. And today, yesterday it closed at somewhere around 34,000, above 34,000 points, which shows that slowly the things are coming into the right direction, especially in the front of investments are concerned. Then the very important changes which has taken place, which has not got reported in a lot of media, is the oil reserves. India has now around 5.33 metric tons of oil reserves, which it has stored because of last 3 months of less demand in oil due to lockdown. This has helped in saving around 2,000 crores to the government exchequer, which should have been paid if the lockdown would not have happened for last 3 months. So this is one of the important. Maintaining the reserve balance of oil is one of the key criteria because India imports 80% of oil. That is the major foreign exchange activity what India needs to shell out in order to import 80% of oil and pay for it. So to that extent, 5.33 metric tons can cater to the need of at least the next 1.5 months of demand of oil in India. So this is one of the very important points, and these are the factors which are very positive factors. And seeing at the price at which the oil prices have gone up, which is traded at $41 per Brent. Yesterday it closed at $41 per Brent, and this is something which we can address it in a very aggressive manner because of the reserves what we are having. So having said these positive factors, It's not a standard. So since people are moving towards more green investments, there is a little bit of less fall in demand, and also there is a lot of fight which is going on in OPEC countries itself, especially between Russia and Saudi Arabia, which has created a lot of issues in terms of oil price and all those things. So that is the reason why the oil crude price went down, and the demand for oil prices, oil and oil related items are coming down. This is known fact for the GCC countries. Now they want to expand and explore their economy so that they can also look into other avenues other than oil, which they seem that will be a threat for them establishment or to establish themselves in the coming years. So India has a very good relationship with UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Qatar and all those countries. So they will be the next destination hub for all the Indian products and services. And whatever we are trying to manufacture and sell, there is already an existing market where the temporary demand for our products are already established in such countries. So this is one of the very important countries, council groups, that is called as Gulf Cooperation Council, where India should play a very strategic role in the coming years, especially in order to improve the relationship for focusing more on business front. So that is one of the advantages what India enjoys, where the other countries are not able to still penetrate into those countries, GCC countries. The next important thing what I want to talk about is the demographic dividend of India. We have a very strong demographic dividend, and this demographic dividend is blessed for us till 2055. That is 35 years down now. From 2020, still another 35 years. We will be having and enjoying this demographic dividend. Demographic dividend is like a double-edged sword. If it is not managed properly, it can again bounce back and create a lot of problems in the society, especially in terms of creating huge unemployment problems. So, one time, compared to the global scenario, India has been blessed with young population. Working population is more in India today. Young population is more in India today. This is something which the other countries are lacking and lagging with. So I think this is one of the factors which we need to look into very seriously. So how do we skill India and how do we create jobs? As Madam was rightly pointing out, unemployment has become a very serious issue in the last 3 months also. But the unemployment problem, how it should be addressed, is one of the, again, biggest challenge in India. I think I'll come back to those points on how to address this issue also. So I can touch upon few areas where I think the sectors can create employment opportunities, and we need to look for exploring such sectors. So when I come to the sectors, I'll just explain you how it can be done. Then the other important factor is there is a continuous rise in middle class, not only in India but across the globe. This is one of the very positive factors which we need to consider when we talk about the post-COVID impact on economy. Because this is one of the factors which creates huge demand and consumption. Because you know that middle class are the people who will be consuming more of essential as well as non-essential commodities. In India, if you see, 53% of consumption in middle class is on non-essential commodities. So that is a huge market in terms of capital goods, entertainment products and services, and also durable consumer goods. So I think this is one of the very important things which India should focus on, not only domestically but internationally, because the rise in middle class has created a lot of demand and consumption related challenges. Whether we are in a position to cater to those demand or challenges is one of the important issues which needs to be addressed in the coming years. So whatever our manufacturing, service-related organizations, whatever we are planning to set up, whether it is in urban area, metropolitan area, or cosmopolitan or rural areas, the focus should be to target more on consumer products, especially in the middle category products, because there will be a huge demand for such type of product as the population of middle class has increased across the globe today, including in India. The next important point which I want to emphasize is on the infrastructure front. Infrastructure is one of the very important focus area for all developed nations. So if you see some, go to Google and start doing some search on Chinese infrastructure or Middle East infrastructure, or for that matter any European country or any America or any country for that matter which are developed countries, and if you think about and just Google around about infrastructure projects which has come up there, the magnitude of the bridges which have been come up, highways which have been come up, smart cities which have been come up there. See, these are all the important things what India should focus more on. Even though we had launched this initiative of smart city projects, Bharatmala projects for national highways, and Gram Sadak Yojanas for rural roads, and some other projects like Sagarmala for uplifting and upgrading of ports, various ports which are there in India. The speed at which the development is taking place is not what is expected in the coming years. Because we are talking on the one side that we are becoming a strategic place for all the supply chain hub across the globe. So the rate at which we were growing all these years is not the rate what the expectation should be for the coming years. So tremendous effort should be made. So that's why I told in the initial start of my presentation, fiscal deficit as a number, please, we should not worry about that numbers as of now. Fiscal deficit of 3.6 or 3.7, that should be the world average. All those things needs to be foregone now for at least for next couple of years. India need to go for more expenditure, especially in the nature of capital items. That is, capex expenditure should go up so that we have more capital formation in the economy. This capital formation is one thing which can create more jobs. I was talking about job creation, right? This is one sector, that is infrastructure is one sector which can create lakhs of jobs. So if we concentrate on construction related things, development of highways, sadaks in villages, rural electrification and rural infrastructure, smart city projects, all those things which we are able to concentrate, right, then the capital expenditure definitely needs to go up. So forget about the fiscal deficit of global standard of 3.6 or 3.7. No developed country in the world is following that standard unless and until we are the only country we are thinking of focusing more on that particular strict on that particular ratio of 3.6% of fiscal deficit should be there. And same thing we are incorporating even to the states also. So I think there is a time which has come. The finance minister should take a tough stance now. So we need to come out of that fiscal deficit, imagine a figure of 3.6 and what the world is telling and all those things. We need to go for more of investments, capital expenditure related investment in order to improve our infrastructure, which we are not doing good. So we need to push for our smart city projects. We need to push for our UDAN and all those aircraft related schemes which were introduced in our budget. So we need to have still more and more connectivity which would come up. The rural infrastructures and the rural roads needs to be pushed at a higher strength now. And also the Sagarmala and Bharatmala project of national highways and all those things needs to be pushed. So money need to be pumped into these infrastructure projects. This will not only create development and growth, but also equally creates a lot of opportunity in terms of employment. So that is one of the factors which needs to be focused by the finance minister, and they need to push for these activity, especially the infrastructure development, which we are still lagging far behind than the advanced countries of the world. So that is one thing which I want to focus more on. The next important focus which the government should keenly look into is on investment in R&D, research and development. India is not doing quite good in this area. We are hardly spending 0.7% of our GDP on research and development. See, this is one of the major constraints in any growth economy. If you go back and see Korea spends almost 4.6% of its GDP on R&D. Israel spends around 3.8% of its GDP on R&D. China spends 3.6% of its GDP on R&D. US spends somewhere around 4% of its GDP on research and development. But in India, it is hardly around less than 1% what we are spending. Even though in the last 2 years, the percentage has gone up. But in this type of pandemic situation, I think this is the right time where we need to push for more and more investment on research and development related activities. Our institutions also need to contribute more towards research and development. This is one area where we see very less research which is happening. So most of our brain drain cases are happening because of this. And we see that we are creating people with a lot of intelligence, but they are going and giving their services somewhere in other country. So this somehow needs to be addressed at a very serious issue. And we need to see that our brains remains within our country and we push more towards research and development expenditure so that good research comes and we start innovating new things and become the global leaders in the coming years, especially in terms of technology and other innovations of science and technology is concerned. So this is one more area which we need to focus more on. The next important area which India needs to still focus is on the intellectual property front. So we have a very poor ranking. We are ranking at 40th rank out of 53 countries in the global index on this intellectual properties. So out of 53 countries, we are in the 40th rank. So the funniest thing is, or the serious thing is, I'm not to call it as funny, sorry. It's the serious thing which is there here is, even though the number of applications for filing patents have gone up in India considerably over a period of time, but if you see the people who are applying for those patents, right, 70% of the patents are by MNCs and MNCs. So in India, people from foreign countries who are not residents of India and the companies which have been incorporated outside India, which is doing business in India, they are the majority people who are bidding for all the new patent licenses. So 70% of what the new patents which have been allotted belongs to this. Hardly 30% is our domestic patents which are being issued in India. So that is one of the serious things which is happening in India. When we come back and see the contribution of institution to patents, the institution like IITs, IIMs and all the reputed institutes what we are running in India, right, their contribution to patents is very, very, very less. Less than 1% of patents is coming from these institutions. If you see in US, this is around 14%. That is, institution contributes towards 14% of patents in foreign countries. That is in US I'm talking about, and this number is equally high in case of other countries also. But when we talk about our country here, contribution of institution to patents is hardly less than 1% or somewhere above 1% now. So this is one of the serious things. We are calling that they are the reputed institutes across the globe, and we are claiming that these are the prestigious institutions, but we are not encouraging those students to come up with a lot of innovative ideas and start registering their ideas through a patent, which can be helpful in India in developing a superficial brand in the coming years. So this is something which we need to push for in the coming years. Then the serious issue which India is again facing is about global admired branding. See, the Prime Minister has called for Make in India, Make for World. But are our products compatible in world market? That's the question which we need to ask. 60% of products what India manufacture is meant for domestic consumption. We never thought of thinking of exporting whatever we manufacture over a period of time. So most of our products, what we get manufactured, right, it is used for domestic consumption. This is not the case in China. If you see Chinese economy, China produces more products which are exportable but which is not consumable in China. China doesn't consume this product. China only exports this product. So, but this is totally reverse in Indian context. In India, we have more than 60% of the products and goods which have been manufactured, which is not branded in global standards, which do not meet any quality standards or benchmark of the global standards, but this is meant for only consumption in the domestic market. But tomorrow when the world is calling us as a strategic hub, we cannot go with this principle. We cannot think of only Make in India and Make for India. No, that should not be the concept. Make in India, Make for World. What Prime Minister has told is right. We need to make a product which is suitable for local consumption. At the same time, we need to also develop sophisticated, high quality, high branded product which can cater to the need and demand of the global market also. This is what is called as integration of the economy to the global market. So this is something what India should focus on an urgent basis. All these days we did not think about these aspects because we also never knew that such type of situation will come where the world economy pushes India to be a strategic partner in their global fight against this coronavirus. So I think time has come. We need to put more and more efforts. The industry especially need to come up with a lot of initiative to build their products and services in such a way that they cater to the needs of the domestic market as well as the global market. We need to follow here what China did 10 years back. China did exactly the same thing. They bifurcated the product for domestic consumption and for exports. And they worked separately with technology, separate skill sets, separate industrial hubs were started only to cater to the export market. So that is the way they started upgrading the skills and also upgrading the technology and also building the infrastructure, especially to take care of the global market. So the same thing needs to be done in India today. We need to revamp all our industrial estates and also industry needs to be revamped so that we can address this issue of global branding and global benchmarking of quality. All those things are utilized in order to manufacture such grade and quality of products which can cater to the demands of the global market. So this is one big thing what India needs to look into now, and this is a high priority area which India should focus in the coming years. Then the next important discussion point which I want to raise here is there is a lot of still the difference between public and private system of economy running in India. When I say public and private economy, I'm talking about public and private companies. There is a broad bifurcation which exists in India. Still, with public sector should have with them only these type of industries, but private sector should not compete with them. See, such type of things were initially required during the industrial plan, and at that point of time, socialist pattern as well as capitalist pattern is what India adopted, mixed system of economy what India adopted. So during those times, yes, it was a need because at that point of time, creation of employment was one of the objectives. So that is how the creation of public sector came into picture. And not only that, removing of regional disparity is what they thought of. And that was the reason why they introduced all these public sector units and all those things. But today, do you think this public sector and private sector bifurcation should still exist? Is it a time for us now to remove this hurdle and restrictions so that both should compete with each other, so that both can be comfortably competing with the global market? Thanks for the finance minister once more efforts, especially when even she opened up the defense sector and insurance sector for private competition. So I think again a tough measure should be taken by the finance minister and the prime minister in the similar line of what Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao did when he was the Prime Minister of India, where he went to, in a single stroke of his pen, he removed within a night all the license branch system. See, this was one of the biggest revolution which took place before these 1991 reforms. So we need to appreciate P.V. Narasimha Rao for bringing such a very tough measure, and he told that on one single day he took a very bland decision that we need to remove all the license branch. So immediately next day all the licensing system was taken out. So such type of bold decision is required now by the finance minister and the prime minister, where we need to even remove this traditional old barriers which are existing between the bifurcation of public sector and private sector. So if I want to just share some figures on this public sectors, how it is working today, out of around 248 public sectors, it's only 178 public sectors which is making profit. The rest 70 public sectors we are continuing with loss for last 10 years. So simply we are running this public sector under loss for last 10 years without getting any benefit from this. So major loss, I think you know, BSNL is one, Air India is another one, and MTNL is the first three major loss-making public sector. Still we are continuing with companies in spite of having so much loss accumulated. So government every year is maintaining this public sector. So from this budget it is allocating funds in order to clear this loss. So what is the purpose of maintaining such huge loss-making public sector, which is coming around 28% of our total public sectors of 248? So I think this is one of the major things. So this is not only happening in central public sector units. Even if you talk about the state private sector units, out of 16 states which have reported their total public sector figures, 13 states total public sector figures are under loss. Only 3 public sector states are making profits. So again, this is something which is a serious issue. I think the demarcation line between public sector and private sector needs to be removed now. High time that we need to make this public sector also equivalently competent with private sector if we want to take a strong position in the coming years in order to compete globally. So this is one effort which needs to be done by again the central government, even though a lot of companies are going for disinvestments, but we need to take care of the disinvestment in a very fast phase, especially the bailing out option should be removed for this. The only option is to close these companies which are making continuous losses over a period of time, or converting that company to some private party mode, public-private partnership. We need to encourage those things and try to see these loss-making companies are converted into profit-making companies in a very quick turnaround time. So that is one of the important things which the government should push in a very fast manner. The next important thing, of course, is the skill. So skill is very important concern in India today. So the latest report, day before yesterday, there was a report which came up in newspaper where this Prime Minister Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PMKVY, that is what the scheme was. So out of 68 lakh people who have been trained in this PMKVY, only 15.5 lakh people have got job. That means only 23% of those people who have been trained in this skill development program, the program which was specifically launched for skill development, only 23% of those people who were trained have got jobs. So the rest of the 77% of them has not been still got any jobs. This is a serious issue. We need to revisit and see what is happening here. Then what are the purpose of investing crores of rupees in the skill development programs, which was spread across 37 sectors and 1,800 job roles. But still, end of the day, we are finding only 15.5 lakh people getting employed out of 68 lakh people being trained. There is some serious issues now. Certificates have been issued, but the certificate is not getting used in employability means it's a very serious concern. So having said so, if we want to compare the skill centers between China and India, we see that in India we have roughly around 14,000 skill development centers, but in China it is more than 8 lakh skill centers are there. See the comparatives, what China is having and what we are having. So I think skill ministry need to now work in a robust way. We need to push more skill development activities. And I'll come back to this in a short while because I want to talk about industry institute and government interface where skill development should be taken as a top priority. So having said so, we need to scale up our skills. We need to scale up our skill centers in the form of the competitiveness training, what they are doing and all those things. And this is a very major area. Some days back, the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, who talked about this, whether Apple is ready to relocate to other countries because Apple has major production center, app development center in China now. So there was a question which was asked to him, whether even Apple is also looking forward to shift its app development center from China to some other countries. The answer given by the CEO was, he told that they were comfortable with Chinese. It's a strange thing. A person who is having the headquarters in US is supporting China there. And the reason why he supported China is because of the quality of skill sets what the people demonstrate. That is not comparable anywhere in the world. That's what the point he made. So he made it very practically clear that China has around 2 million. Hello? Hello?
Is there any problem?
No, someone was talking to me.
Okay.
Shall I continue? Any questions? Questions we'll take at the last, right?
Yes, questions we will take after some time. Let
Okay.
him finish his speech first. Yes.
Okay.
I'll request Honorable Speaker to please, can you conclude within 10 minutes because we are running short of time.
Okay, fine, madam. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I'll complete within the next 5-10 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The skill is very important. That's what the Tim Cook, Apple CEO, told about. He told that they don't have absolutely any issue with China's skill sets because and the technology wise, China is far advanced than any other country in the globe today. They have around 2 million app developers. 2 million app developers are there in China who have high sophisticated skill set of any technology, visual or audio or any technology. If you tell right, they are ready to reproduce the same within a days of time. So that is a huge resource base what China has in terms of technology. And India also should work in that pace in order to get such type of skill sets in India for catering to the need and demand of the coming years. The next very important focus point what I want to touch upon is on the digital transformation. So we have already in the industry 5.0. See, if you see the history of the industrial revolution which has taken place from the 18th century onwards, so industry 1.0 and 2 lasted for 170 years. That is the time gap for which the new technology came and replaced the old technology. But it took only 70 years from moving from industry 3.0 to industry 4.0. Sorry, 2.0 to 3.0. It took only 70 years. But it took only 30 years from moving into 3 to 4, that is 3.0 to 4.0. But the bigger change is, we have already moved into industry 5.0. It has taken only 20 years for us to move from 4.0 to 5.0. This is the speed at which the transformation in digital environment is taking place. So things are getting defined. technology has become more now global thing. Cognitive system of technology is what the people are expecting today. So the concepts, whatever India was trying to still adopt, is become already obsolete now. And we are pushing towards the 5G and all those things. Even though there are a lot of issues with 5G, we are seeing a lot of cases which are coming up in UK court and all those things. But it is inevitable. People are already moved into 5.0. So that took only 20 years. That is very short span of time. Development has changed. Technology has changed. So the world has changed in the last so many years. So that is the point I want to make. So when we talk about the digital transformation in industry, so that is one of the biggest adaptability factor which Indian industries are still facing, because majority of our industries are in MSME sectors, which are, most of them are either partnership based or sole proprietorship based industries. They are the people who are contributing towards informal sectors. 82% of our businesses are in informal sectors and 92% are in unorganized sectors now. So this is one of the serious issues which needs to be addressed at a very higher rate and a very faster rate also. So coming back to the revolution which has taken place, so today we have AI, robotics, ML and all those things. So this has been already incorporated in small industries in China also. But in India still we are labor intensive industries. I think the post-COVID scenario, especially where the migration has resulted lot of space in MSME sector, I think it's the right time for people in MSME sectors to move into AI and all this machining and robotics and all those things. So time has come where our industrial sectors, especially the small and medium industries, now needs to go for a revamp, because they contribute towards 45% of our GDP and 40% of our export. So there is a huge scope for these industries to now change. So which were earlier labor intensive now needs to push for capital intensive industries. I think that is one sector which needs to move further. Coming back to the digital transformation, work from home has become a culture now. So people have become more convergent with work from home, and also if we see the last 5 reputed companies, 5 years revenue and the employment generation statistics, right? So the top 5 IT companies in India, the revenue generation, what they have done in the last 5 years has started increasing compared to the employability thing, what they have given in the last 5 years. So there is a drastic change. What I mean to say is they are less dependent on professionals now. They don't want to go for more hiring now. They want to go for more AI and robotics now. So they have stopped hiring people which used to be hired in the before 5 years. Now the same job is done by technology. It's been replaced by technology. So that has resulted in huge cost saving for them. That is the reason for their revenue generation. That is one of the reasons for revenue generation. That's what the 5 companies, top Indian 5 companies, IT companies have revealed in their analysis. So work from home will be becoming a culture in the going forward. So TCS is already told 75% of its work will be done from home. So I think that is a going forward culture which we need to encourage and which needs to be taken care of. So the other important technology transformation is in the form of gig economy, GIC economy. That is, most of the job will be done by specialized people. So they will be doing sitting at home. So no need to hire people. Take them on consultancy basis. For our basis, you pay them. They will complete your project and they'll give back to you. Instead of hiring the people, putting on board, giving them all the statutory benefits and salaries and all those things, hire some consultant who can come as a freelance consultant for you and give them some assignment. You define what is the hour within which you need to submit that assignment. So you will take that assignment, you will complete the work and I will give to you. That is called as gig economy. So I think that will be in the foremost front in the coming years. And that has been there already for so many years. But now you can see the things which will be coming up. So the next important factor which I want to tell and then talk about one small factor and close it off. The black money is one of the important things which India should now seriously look for. So we know how this black money has created a lot of havoc in the system. I am talking about black money, not domestic black money. I am talking about black money which has been parked outside India. So it's the high time now. India should focus on bringing back this black money. Still, we don't know what is the estimate of black money which is lying outside India. There was sometime one projection made that it is around 120 lakh crore and all those things. But still, I am not clear about what is the magnitude or how much is the black money which is there, which has been kept outside India. So I think time has come where government needs to keenly take some appropriate action, especially in terms of bringing back this black money now. Even though SIT was constituted under the guidelines of Supreme Court, even though 18 names were relieved, but that was still lying, those names are still lying in the sealed cover with the Supreme Court. Still, they have not taken any action as of now. So, I think the only route which is possible is as the Supreme Court advocate Mr. Nariman had told long back, Fari Nariman had told long back in Rajya Sabha. He had told that there is a provision in the Constitution and also United Nations resolution is there where the government can, through an ordinance mechanism issued by the President, they can nationalize all the money which is there outside India. Then they can put for the investigation of all the money once it comes to the government, and they can see what is the black and what is not black, and accordingly they can take strict action. I think this is a time where we need this issue of bringing back the black money which has been stored in tax haven countries. Government should take a very serious action on this black money economy. Then the last point which I want to talk about is the rural push. Because without that, we cannot conclude any topic in India today. Because 67% of our population still resides in rural area. So the very important factor here, what I want to highlight is, it's high time that we need to push for the rural economy. We have seen that 60 lakh migrants have gone back to their natives. This is the estimate what has come now. 60 lakh migrants have gone back to their natives. So 80% chances of these people will not come back to cities again. If they come back also, they will relocate to the place nearby their villages or nearby their district, but not to places like Mumbai, Bangalore or Ahmedabad, like that, they don't go. So this has become a very serious issue. So how to address this issue of migration is one of the important things, because now the rural population has gone up suddenly, drastically in the last 2 months. The dependent on agriculture has gone up. So now the thanks for the initiative which the government has introduced, especially on the 1st of June, pushing for agricultural reforms, especially in areas like animal husbandry and in agriculture sector itself, where they have amended the APMC Act, Mandi Act, and also Essential Commodities Act. So this is one big push for rural economy, where it creates lot of opportunities in terms of removing of all the regulations which were there earlier on essential commodities have been now, which creates lot of value added economic activities to progress in those directions, especially in the private front. So I think this is one of the great and significant move. Not only that, the IMD, that is Indian Meteorological Department, has projected a very good normal monsoon in the coming years. And we have seen in the South India already the showers have started, and there will be a very good opportunities for people who have migrated to take off their erstwhile initial activities of farming and all those things. So more of commercial farming, more of agriculture related activities will push the economy back into the mainstream again. So that is one of the things which I wanted to say. Even in the GDP front also, the same thing was expressed yesterday in the ministry, where they told that agriculture, which is contributing towards 17% of the GDP, can be a pushing factor in the coming years, which can push the rural economy to get more and more contribution towards GDP. So that is the optimistic thing what we need to rely upon. And still there were areas like green investment, health sector and all those things. Due to proximity of time, I will not be able to cover all those topics. But education is also one of the important sector which I wanted to highlight, but due to proximity of time, I will not be able to highlight all those points. But I think there are still more and more things which will be expected in the coming years. And I think India is one country which can look for more prospects, especially in terms of the opportunities and challenges which will be coming. So, only thing is, it's time for us to spend. Don't worry about the factors like fiscal deficit. Don't worry about the various rating agencies, what their projection India will be negative. So, in negative itself, we are doing very good actually. When they are telling world projection is 5.2 negative, India is 3.2. That's what World Bank has told. So that means in negative, we are at a higher side now. We are in a good position when it comes to the negative point also. And but 21, all countries are expecting that India's growth rate will be somewhere around 6.5 to 7%. This is a positive outlook what the world is showing on India. So we have a very tremendous future. And I think this pandemic has created a new opportunity avenue for growth and development. All of us need to contribute and go towards the growth in order to push the economy for becoming the strategic partner in the global context, what the globe is talking about. So having said so, thank you for giving me an opportunity to make my presentation on this particular topic. So it was a very beautiful crowd. So there was no disturbances. So normally when there is such type of meeting, we see a lot of disturbances happening. When you are having a huge crowd who are attending this net meeting and all those things, we see a lot of disturbances. But it was a very lovely crowd which was there. I enjoy talking to such really, I think most of them are professors here by allied group, and they are the people who are really you need to take up the next level of reforms to the next level, that is their students. So having said so, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to come and share my views on this particular very important topic. So I am ready to take some questions. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, sir. Now, you have shared your opinions. And we have enriched really because you have touched all the major issues in nutshell. And especially I would like to say that the points we normally discuss in economic webinars about this the post-COVID-19 scenario, the other issues that you have focused with, which is very rare and which is of course very much necessary, especially I will mention the concept of that demographic dividend, which is very much important to discuss. And you have very much, you have discussed this relation between India with other countries, the economic relation, which is very much important in this scenario, in this crisis situation. Because now the world is a global world and India is very much a part of this global world, and the world is looking for this Asian countries very much because we are populated countries like China, India. So the interrelation between the country with the global economy is very much important. And sir has explained this in a very nice way, and everybody can understand it. So he has explained it in such a lucid manner that even the person who is not from economics background can understand that. Thank you, sir. And another thing I would like to share that he also nicely presented the fact that intellectual property thinks this is a very important issue, and the relation between private and public sector. We know that India is a country of mixed economy where both the sectors are equally important. So he actually stress the fact that many public sector companies are running in losses, but government is not closing these companies. Now, as a student of economics, we know that there is a point that is called a shutdown point. So sometimes it actually becomes necessary to carry on the production rather than closing down. The closing down expenditure will be more than running cost of the firms. So in that case, government cannot close all the loss-making units. So that is not possible. And another thing is that in the face of tremendous unemployment pressure, it is not easy for the government to close the loss-making units because many people, thousands and lakhs of people are employed in government sectors. Now, there is an important challenge which is coming that I will be coming later on. But first, let me share some important issues. I would like to say that if we go back to the economic survey of 2018 and 19, over there, the emphasis of the government, especially Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, his emphasis was on free data usage, helping the small-scale sector, of course, fixing a particular limit. Then another important thing he mentioned and emphasized was changing the habit of the economy. Now, this is a socio-economic concept. It's not simply an economic concept. And COVID-19 has actually taught us to change the habit of the economy. Many things have changed. The digital things coming, everything work from home, and the professors are teaching from home. So the students are getting the habit of this online classes and all. So the socio-economic scenario is changing because of that, not only the economic situation. Now, what I'm trying to say is that in 2018-19 survey, actually the emphasis was on behavioral economics, we call it. That is, the Nobel laureate Richard Thaler, he actually created this behavioral economics. He emphasized that. So the emphasis of Indian economy was based on that. And what do we find that in 2017-18, the GDP growth rate was 7.2%. And before that, India experienced 8% growth. That was highest, I think. And I think sir will also agree with me that that was the highest rate of growth in India. But
Madam, one second. I just want to share my views on this point.
Yes.
Madam, regarding this public sector units you are talking about, right? Not closing of loss-making companies.
Mm-hmm.
See, exactly, I agree with you. Even the IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, doesn't advocate that we need to close these companies. Only thing is we need to revive these companies in a better way so that it can suit to the requirement of what the global changes are taking place. Especially if I want to bring the example of ITI, Indian Telephone Industries.
Yes.
It was a sick industries and it was at the verge of closing, right? They revamped it. They actually bought into a revival plan wherein they introduced new technology and they started competing with the private firm. That type of encouragement needs to be given. That is what somewhere it is lagging now. So government support in terms of helping them in terms of policy framework or in terms of pumping money into them without having any ideas of development or R&D and all those things should be stopped. Only genuine cases where they can compete with private firms, right? I think that needs to be given push. That's what my point was there.
Yes, I got it. I just want to share one thing that in this case, in the case of revival of public sector, the competitiveness should be enhanced, which is quite much necessary because modern technologies and not only that, the provisioning of services should be improved. You can see that being an Indian, everybody we are facing, that if you go to a private bank, the service is much better than any other nationalized bank.
Exactly.
So that kind of competitiveness should be incorporated. That's the point.
Exactly.
And another important point I would like to share is the COVID-19 has created a severe problem to the unorganized sector. This unorganized sector is actually 82% of Indian population is engaged in this sector, and they are facing tremendous problem. So actually they are moving towards their own native towns, their villages. And if we look at the data, what do we find? That this unorganized sector is actually 93% of the total workforce. Just see the data. They are contributing a lot in our GDP. But we should look after this matter. We should, like the government policies should look after this matter. This kind of thing should not happen. They are walking thousands of miles with their children, their families, with unfed. So this is not desirable. In any civilized country, this is not desirable. And this is a concerning situation, no doubt. And
Yeah, Madam, if I can add here, see,
I just want to say one thing, that according to a survey, we find that 71% of these migrant workers, they do not have any written job contract. 54%, they do not get paid leave. 49% of these migrant workers, they do not have social security schemes. Government provisions are there, but they are not getting. So I think there are some problems in delivering these provisional facilities to them. So this sector is a wide sector of the country, but they are very unsafe. And so I think this is a concerning fact. Yes, sir, what do you want to share?
Yeah, exactly. If I just take some time and talk about this GST database, right? You see that 1.27 crore people have registered in GST.
Yes.
Okay. If you see the total number of MSME, it is around 6.5 crores. That's what the government figures are. 6.5 crores registered MSMEs are there. And around 11 lakh companies are there. 11 lakh companies which have been incorporated under MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. 11 lakh companies are there.
Yes.
So around 6.7 crore is what the total business sectors which are there. But if you see the number of dealers who have been registered under GST, it is only 1.27 crores. Where are the rest of the people then? What are they doing then?
Yes, yes.
This is the biggest disconnect there in the system. And when we are telling that we are not able to maintain the tax GDP ratio at 16%, 18% and all those things, since indirect tax contribute major taxes to our exchequer in the form of fiscal revenue. And when we are talking about so much of huge companies which are running business but which are not contributing towards any tax system, and I don't think how we can justify these facts. There is something going wrong in the system actually. Whether 6.5 crore database is wrong or the 11 lakhs what we are talking about, some disconnect is there. So that needs to be addressed. That is a major issue.
Yes, of course. And another thing, that in international trade, what do we find? That if we come to the scenario that India exports only actually 19.2% of GDP is exported and only 23% is imported. So actually we are getting that the self-sufficiency, that is an issue of the central government, that India should become self-sufficient. It's a wonderful idea, no doubt. But in the global scenario, I think you cannot just remain isolated in any way. So the focus should be to create or to engage our MSME sector, the large sector, in export products, like they should produce more export goods, export commodities. So I would like to share here one very funny thing with all of this audience, that actually Pietro Rivoli from USA, he's a researcher. Actually, the name of his book is, you can go through it, The Travels of a T-Shirt in the Global Economy. Now, in his research in China, he found that the thread used in making that T-shirt has come from Texas, USA. So this is, of course, a very funny thing, because you cannot be isolated. What is actually sold in the brand name of USA, the thread of the shirt is actually the brand name from China, but the thread is coming from USA. So how can you be isolated? So sir has actually highlighted this point nicely, so we know that. Now, another thing I would like to focus, sir, that is, we also know that there the Indian economy is facing a problem of demand shortage. And this is not only because of the COVID-19 situation. The shortage of demand, from the data we find, the problem is coming from last 2-3 years. In fact, from 2016, this demand deficiency problem is there in Indian economy. So, and the government, the policy of the government is taking the help of monetary policy by reducing the interest rate. So, I would like to get your opinion about it.
Yeah, madam, this demand situation, I did not make a point here before I wanted to talk about COVID impact. We should have discussed about even a little bit of time on the past economic situation, what is prevailing in India. See, the tax GDP ratio, what I was referring to, was hardly around 7.9% till December. So this is one of the serious concerns which was there, and many people were not having sufficient money in their hands. So somewhere there was a total disconnect. See, when we talk about demand is coming from middle class people. That is, they are the people who will be pushing the economy into the mainstream. So, demand is one of the serious concerns which was there, not only this post-COVID. This is something which has happened for the last 3 years. We are facing the shortage of demand. So, demand and consumption are something which is very important for pushing the economy back. But this is something which the government was trying to do, especially in form of bringing down the lending rates and encouraging people in the form of direct cash benefit transfer scheme and all those things. But somehow this could not gear up to the expectation at what things used to happen because of one is continuous failure of monsoon in 2017 and 18 and also some mid of 19, and India went into serious problem of drought. That is one of the again serious concern which was there, and these resulted in the economy not kicking back at the level of what it was expected of. So main thing is revenue consolidation. So revenue consolidation, that is fiscal part, was something which was hit. Monetary part was taken care of by RBI, but fiscal part was the biggest issue because that is ultimately the thing which goes into the disposable income of each individual. So that did not happen properly. That was the major concern which happened in those 2 years, especially where the demand started pushing up.
Yes, and another thing I would like to share, that is the actually demand deficiency is present in our economy. In fact, in pre-COVID situation also. But because of this coronavirus and COVID-19, the economy is now facing the challenge of supply shortage also. Not only the demand shortage was there, and this situation is again creating a problem of supply shortage. So from both sides of the economy, the problem is getting aggravated. And another thing I would like to discuss with you, share with the audience, that this investment incentive, which is very much necessary, because we all know that unless and until investment revives, production, employment cannot be generated. From investment, proper investment, then only production will be generated, income will be generated, and that will create demand. This is a simple way, simple economic theory. But if we focus only on the monetary policy, that is simple reduction of interest rate. Now we know the history of economy. In 1930s, USA faced the Great Depression. Over there, at that time, US government reduced the rate of interest. But in spite of that, investment did not increase. That was the situation in 1930 when John Maynard Keynes, he suggested that simple reduction of interest is not sufficient to generate demand. So in that case, what is necessary? It is necessary for the government to come up and create job opportunities. So don't you think that method is necessary for our country?
Exactly. That's what I was referring to when I told about infrastructure projects, right? I mentioned that particular point of infrastructure.
Yes.
See, that is one of the sector which can create lakhs of jobs at a point of time. So it may be rural roads, it may be urban roads, it may be national highways, it may be development of ports, it may be rural infrastructure, or it can be construction of dams or any other monetary thing. So one thing what government can do now is we need to go back to the dream of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who told about the linking of rivers. See, we have major rivers which are there in India. We see that drought situation still taking place in a lot of other parts of India. So why don't we start up with linking of rivers? So if we start linking of rivers, definitely it creates a lot of job opportunities and a lot of opportunities in terms of agriculture activities also, wherein we can bring in even the barren lands which were not used for cultivation to make it as a cultivable lands. So that is enormous investment what government should push for. So regarding investment, we are talking about RBI. RBI, as we know that it is only restricted to monetary policy. So they don't have too much say in this 1.0 and 2.0, whatever the announcement they made right in this COVID situation. They don't have any say because bank decides finally. RBI can just give instructions saying that we will bring down the SLRs, we will bring down the CRRs or repo rates, we will bring down all those things they can say. But who is the final implementation authority? Implementation authority is the bank. So banks doesn't take the suggestion of what the RBI says. That is how the things work. They even RBI cannot take the suggestions of the government also. That is again the other way of confrontations which are there. So you know what happened to Urjit Patel. So he was forced to go out because since he could not transfer that amount to government, central government, he was asked to go out. So one thing what we can do is floating of bonds. Floating of bonds, government bonds in the international market is one thing what India can do for further pushing of investments. We can call it as a COVID bond itself, COVID-19 bonds. We can issue that bonds in the global market. So we will have tremendous response. As I told you about share market, already $1.7 billion has come into the share market in the last 3 months. And the SIP investments with domestic people are going up in mutual funds. See, these are the indicators that investments are there. People are ready to invest because this is the right time for the bearish market where people start buying a lot of money, especially in terms of marketable products which have future growth oriented things. People have now stopped investing in real estate. So one point I wanted to make is, if I have 2 minutes time, I'll explain that. Can I take 2 minutes of your time, please?
Of course. Yes.
Yeah. See, madam, one important change which will be coming in future is products will be converted into services. That is one of the biggest thing which will be happening. Whatever we call today as products, right, that will become services tomorrow. So one of the product is real estate. Earlier we used to buy land, we used to construct building, it used to be used as an investment opportunity and it used to be shown as an asset in your books of accounts. But today, no one is interested in buying real estate because they don't know what will be their job and where they will be posted. So people have enormous opportunity today to move from one place to another place. Today, if I am in Bangalore, tomorrow I can get a job in Hyderabad and move to Hyderabad. Day after tomorrow, some good opportunity comes for me in Delhi and move to Delhi. So that is the role of younger generation today. Younger generation is more worried about their job, their level of enjoying the world and all those things. They are least bothered about buying a house, maintaining their house and staying in that house. All those things they are least bothered. So now this asset is becoming a service now. So there are a lot of service apartments which has come up now. So the concept of service apartment is gaining a lot of value now, where people are moving towards more service-oriented things rather than product-oriented things. So I think these are the factors which we need to think about when we are talking about the investment factors. So people are least bothered about investing in all this asset type which we thought that these are assets. Similarly with cars also. So people will think that if I want to buy a car, I need to spend around 10 lakhs. Why should I buy a car when there is a Ola and Uber? Why I should depend on car? And also buying a car and keep it, parking it and maintaining the car and driving the car is a very headache today in the cities. So why I should own a car? Instead of that, I'll pay rent. So I can own a car, right? For 5 days also you can own a car, or 1 day also you can own a car, pay the rent, they will pick you up, they will drop to your place. So that's how product is becoming services going forward. So that is one thing which we need to also look into, how the economy is changing.
Yes, another issue I would like to just discuss here, that is, we all know that in India the problem of poverty is also already there. 21%, around 21% of the population below poverty line. But the thing is, at the same time, we have tremendous inequality in our country. And we know that from the data that 70% of the wealth is in the hand of 1% population. We all know that. Now, do you think that this enhancement of wealth and property tax can help the government to reduce this inequality, or is it necessary right now? Because people are suffering from money shortage, income shortage, demand deficiency. Do you think that this can be implemented right now?
I don't think it can be done, madam, because India already follows a progressive tax system where we are taxing the richer caste people. Okay, so ours is a progressive tax system where we tax the rich people at higher rate and poor people at a lower rate.
Yes.
So we are already following that practice. So if you still go on taxing the rich people, right, definitely again it creates a position of black money in the system. Because
no, I'd like to interrupt, but I'm not talking about the progressive income tax or corporate tax. Progressive income tax is there and corporate tax is there. But I'm talking about the wealth tax. Wealth tax can be increased, like many famous economists of the world are suggesting in this scenario, that not talking about the corporate tax, because corporate tax can deteriorate the investment situation. No, I'm not talking about that. Income tax also. But I'm talking about the wealth and property tax. The government can increase that, because wealth is not actually the necessary thing for a rich person. The rich person is getting a lump sum money out of his huge property, not only in our country but in foreign countries. So that wealth tax and property tax can be used in this situation of deficit, fiscal deficit and all of the government.
yeah, property tax again, it is a state subject, right? It doesn't come under center.
Yes.
One thing is wealth tax, yes, it was abolished. Actually, it was there in India and they abolished the wealth tax.
Yes.
So the purpose of abolishing the wealth tax is because of the black money itself. They thought that if I start imposing tax on wealth, then people will start moving out of India. That exactly is happening now also.
Yes.
So, and it has happened in the past also. So 8% of our richest people are every year traveling outside India. They are becoming NRIs now. So for tax purpose, they are becoming NRIs. Even though they are citizen of India, when it comes to the question of taxation, right, they are becoming NRIs because they think that let us move to tax haven countries and start parking all our investments there. Why we should disclose in India? See, and one more thing, what is happening is if you keep on asking the rich people to share more of their income, right? Then if you are spending that money for popularizing scheme, like bringing all those subsidized rice scheme or giving free electricity or free water, all those things, if you start doing it, then definitely people in the longer run think that why I should work for others, why I should earn so much money and later someone takes that money without contributing anything to the economy.
Yes.
That is exactly the demarcation which has happened between the rich and the poor in India. So one thing is very sure, you cannot distribute the money, collecting money from the rich and to the poor unless some economic activity takes place there. So unless we do that, if we really the rural economy or any poor people should contribute, then only they need to be subsidized with. Without contribution, if we are subsidizing by taxing rich people or collecting more taxes from rich people, I don't think the economy will survive in the long run because of that. That is exactly
the policy of the government from, I mentioned about the 1819 economic survey over there, the policy of the government is to reduce subsidy. So if you reduce subsidy, then of course farmers will be penalized. So reduction of subsidy is not, I think, desirable in this crisis situation. The government should take.
Subsidy is again a matter which is come up in WTO. WTO is always pushing India. That is, World Trade Organization is always pushing India to reduce the subsidies or come out of the subsidy raj.
Yes.
So because they are the most favored nation status, what has been given right is hampering the global trade. Even other countries are also demanding that why you are only targeting us? Why don't you target India, which has a low subsidy, high subsidy thing in their budget? So why don't you advise India? That's what there is a pressure for regarding that.
Niloy, can you hear me? Niloy? Hello, Niloy, can you hear me? Niloy,
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
how much time left? Will you please tell me? Some questions.
Madam, time is almost over. So,
So let's
that-
some questions. Yes.
just I want to tell one or two questions to the speakers there through you. So, can I ask the question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, sir, the main and the major problem at this moment before the Indian economy, that is the unemployment and lack of growth and the informal sector, which you have already shared, and you presented a very outstanding presentation. Thanks for that. But I have just quite suggestions or quite comments regarding that issues. The thing is that what I expect in the fiscal stimulus package, that is government much should care about the informal economy. It was lacking. From my point of view, it was lacking. And government's main target was to facilitate the availability of the liquidity. And this definitely may have some positive effects. But the question is that as far as the present scenario is concerned, that is the economy is facing a lacking of demand. So demand should be generated by raising the disposable income, by cutting the direct taxes like income taxes or other measures. And what the important crucial issue, that is the migrants have returned to their home. That means they are now in near future they will participate in the job market of that specific state. So how the states will manage that problem? That is also a big issue before the country. And I just want to tell you that what I expect in the fiscal stimulus package, that MGNREGA should be extended for up to 200 days. But it was not changed. It was as usual. It is as usual 100 days. I expect this. So how do we rescue the informal economy? Or I think the cash transfer to the poor people's that should be more and more. That should be through the proper channel. Through that we can eradicate the problem of corruption. So corruption is also a big issue for the economy. Before the economy, that hinders the growth process. That obstacles the poor peoples to get participated in the growth scenario. So these are my suggestions, and these are my conclusions from the overall discussion. And another thing is the question to you, sir, that is rise in stock index actually affect the real or hardcore economy?
What is that? Rising the stock?
Rising stock index, that means Sensex or NSE, actually affects the migrant laborer, that actually affects the informal workers who is engaging in an informal activity.
No. That is nothing to do with the informal sector, right? This is something which is building confidence.
So, sir, how could I say that the stock index rise is the parameter of the economy is growing, economy is fastest moving? How could I say that most of the peoples are outing of job, most of the peoples are facing the problem of poverty, etc., etc.?
No, it is only one of the factors. It is not the factor which is indicating all those things. It is one of the factors. A very strong stock market index, right? It suggests that people have confidence in that particular countries. So once people develop confidence in that particular country, right, then slowly the economic activities will start flourishing. That is one of the indicators. That's it. It's not the only indicator which is pushing all these things. So you need to look it in a macro view that how this index will be calculated. So index will be showing the different sectors. So sectors push will be there. So when I say that index is doing good, it doesn't mean that all companies are doing good.
Yes.
Some of the companies in that particular index will be pushing that index into the next level. So government can now have at least little bit of confidence that if I can float some bonds tomorrow in the market, especially the rural infrastructure bonds like rural electrification bonds or rural land development bonds or highway development bonds. So if I can promote, then equally that will also be subscribed by the investors from the global context. So that is exactly what is happening today. So if you see the G6 bonds which were issued in the last year, right? Last week, sorry, not last year. 10,000 crores have been raised within a 15 days time. And the maturity period has gone up to 5 years now. But people are subscribing for that bond. See, that is the right time because that will not come with huge interest rates. If you go and borrow from World Bank, IMF or ADB, it comes with a condition. You need to pay for interest. So you know that what is the portion of interest on our spending. That is, if a rupee comes and rupee goes out, you know what is the percentage of what the money we pay towards interest. It's almost around 22% of our revenue is going towards payment of interest payments only. So in that way, I think it brings the morale of investors. So it doesn't, we cannot say that whenever the market goes up or whenever the things happen, it burns the informal sector or the job sector or something like that. It cannot be done. Okay, it cannot be concluded like that.
Okay, sir, just one question. Another thing is that just your opinion about the MGNREGA. How could we use the MGNREGA to solve the problem of unemployment in the informal sector and how to tackle the problem of migrants as far as the reality is concerned?
Yeah, that's, I think if you see the government, it has enhanced the per day amount which will be given in MGNREGA, right? That is from 182 rupees to, they have increased to 210 rupees, I think so, 210 or 212. 202, I think so. They have increased by 20 rupees per day. So this will give opportunities for at least 135 man days. So both husband and wife and even grown-up children can work in this particular MGNREGA projects. And there are a lot of, that's what I told. Government is now keen on pushing for more of rural infrastructure. This is the high time that government needs to spend money on rural infrastructure because many of the people who have gone back to villages, majority of them will not come back to cities again. So it is only the push on rural economy which can stimulate the growth for India now. So since it's a high time, because it's actually correct time for the growing season of Rabi and all those things are coming in play, and even the animal husbandry activities are coming up and picking up in the global scenario today. I think MGNREGA will be one of the very encouraging activity which can take care or bridge the gap between their agriculture related activities and the time which they have now, spare time which they have now, which can be used for compensating them for to make their daily living. So if you see the overall scheme, what has been announced by Finance Ministry, right, you nowhere see any popularistic scheme or not even schemes like where it will impact the economy in the later run, right? Waiving of interest or waiving of loans, such scheme has not been announced by the ministry. So the only objective why they did it is, see, this is a time where we need to grow and we need to compensate back to the system. It's not the case of waiving of loans. Waiving of loans again will bounce back in terms of higher cost in future. Either I or you need to pay higher taxation or we need to pay higher amount in form of interest and all those things. So government has taken a balanced approach here. So they have gone by step approach. So they want to address only those issues which are coming in line, not thinking about what will happen after 8 months. So let us be prepared to face the current situation. That is what the government is trying to do. So they are not thinking about what will happen 5 months hence or 8 months hence. They are not seriously bothered about those things. They want to address the issues immediately, how things needs to be addressed. That is the point of focus what the government has done, and that you can see it in all the policy measures what the government has introduced in now.
And for demand generation, Niloy, I would like to say that MGNREGA is a very wonderful project, no doubt, in all over the world. This is the best employment generation program.
Exactly, madam.
Nowadays, they are getting only rupees 200. In this situation, for demand generation, I would like to say that this salary, or what you should say, this rupees 200 should be increased to at least 300 or 400. The government should double it at least. So
and
that the
from
demand
to at least 100 days, madam, also.
Yes, demand efficiency will be handled. Yes, direct money is needed in the hands of the poor people,
exactly.
Middle class. Okay, because credit is necessary, no doubt. But if you face a problematic situation, immediately what do you need? Liquidity, cash. So that can be actually provided to the people by direct money transfer, that type. So
Exactly.
can we take any other question, Niloy?
Madam, these are the questions that came in the chatting section of Google Meet.
Any other?
And
We have
any
actually,
other-
I think sir has discussed most of the issues.
most of the issues
Yes.
that it was very outstanding presentation or deliberation made by sir and madam also. Madam also.
Joy, do you think any new issue is there which has not been covered in our discussion? That we can take.
Ma'am.
That is
Hello.
Ma'am,
that is
yes.
the issue of non-performing asset of the bank, and that is also a very one of the very important issues before the economy, especially the national for the case of nationalized banks. But that so it is also
About the not performing as that if the banks cannot provide sufficient credit, then of course the non-performing asset will increase. And in this scenario, poverty is increasing, people are not getting money, they are losing jobs. So in the front of these problems, the non-performing asset problem will be there. But I hope after some time this problem can be tackled by the government. This will not be a serious problem after some time. Sir, can you please tell us? Yes.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's time.
So
Okay, just 1 minute, madam. Just 1 minute. Yeah, yes, today morning also in the newspaper there is an article which has been written especially by a lot of banks have shared their views on NPAs. So as you are rightly pointed out, madam, yes, NPA will not be a serious issue in the coming years. I know, I think you know why the NPA issue started only from 2 years onwards. So the reason behind it was Basel III norms which makes mandatory for disclosing all the outstanding things as a part of capital restructuring thing. I think government has enough measures which has been done in that particular NPA management also. Yes, especially the IBC provisions which has now been increased to 1 year instead of 6 months. Earlier they told 6 months and they enhanced it to 1 year. Now definitely a lot of insolvency cases will not come up. So once insolvency cases will not come up, realization from bank also will fall in the coming 1 year. So it's a temporary phenomena as madam has rightly pointed out. So NPA is something which needs to be addressed and I think it will be addressed in the coming years. So it will not be a serious issue.
Yes, and at the last thing I want to share with this audience that one important issue should be considered in this scenario. Now, our country, we know that it is a democratic country, largest democracy we have. This problem of migrant labor. Okay, now if the state governments they look after this matter, because this COVID-19 actually pointed out that the problem, the crisis on the migrant laborers. So if they can get employment opportunities in their own states, why will they migrate from one state to another? So after facing this particular issue, state governments should look after this matter seriously. That we should try to provide employment to this segment. They don't need a lot of skill and construction, many other industries can be developed which can employ these migrant laborers so that they will not migrate from one state to another. This is a serious issue we should take into consideration.
I think UP model needs to be followed here. UP has followed this model actually.
Yes.
Uttar Pradesh has followed this
I think Principal Ma'am would like to say something.
Thank you, Madam, Chairperson, Madam, and thank you, sir, for such an outstanding deliberation. And we discussed a lot of topics, lot of issues we raised through this lecture, and it was very much informative and effective session. I think audience will update it from this lecture. They can update themselves, including me also. I'm also very much optimistic that Indian economy can solve all the problems and our economy can once again regain its growth path. And with this optimism, I would like to end this program. And before ending, I would request our departmental teacher, Professor Saptarshi Chakraborty, to give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Professor Nilay Gupta, sorry to interrupt. I have a question, couple of questions. Do I have your permission to ask
Just one.
Professor Rabindranath Kaushik?
That time is already out.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
you can ask the one question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just-
Thank you very much. Okay. First of all, sir, let me express my thankfulness.
I
Yes,
think we will
madam.
ask the question to sir later on. Time is already 2.5 hours.
Okay,
Is that
okay,
okay?
madam. Okay, no. Yeah,
Is
yes,
that
madam.
okay, madam?
Absolutely.
It will be better for Siddhartha to send it to Sir's email ID. I think Sir will respond you.
Yeah, I can respond. Not an issue.
Okay, so you can send it to Sir's
Fine.
email ID. Okay.
Okay.
So
That will
now-
be very nice.
To come to give the vote of thanks for this program, today's program.
Thanks, Professor Nilay Gupta. Am I audible?
Yes, you can continue.
Honorable dignitaries and most valuable guests, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Department of Economics of Taradevi Harakchand Kankaria Jain College. I, Professor Saptarshi Chakraborty and Professor Nilay Gupta of Department of Economics want to express our gratitude to Honorable Speaker Sir, Mr. CMA N. Rabindranath Kaushik, who has spent his precious time for us and graced this occasion with his auspicious presence. We extend our sincere thanks to Honorable Chairperson Madam Dr. Mahananda Kanjilal, Associate Professor of Economics, Jogesh Chandra Chaudhary College, Kolkata, for her dignified presence. It is our blessings to have her valuable presence in our national webinar. We also thank our college governing body president, Mr. Sohan Raj Singhi, and our secretary, Mr. Lalit Kankaria, for their constant support and blessings to make our program a great success. We are very much obliged to our principal madam, Dr. Mausumi Singh Sengupta, for her constant support and motivation to organize this kind of national webinar in this pandemic situation. We are very much grateful to IQAC members. It is not possible for us to have such golden success without their cooperation. We also give our gratitude to Professor Rituparna Kundu, Professor Shubhodip Das, Professor Pooja Pal from Department of Computer Science, Professor Siddhartha Chatterjee from Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Professor Somotonu Adhikari from Department of Business Administration, and Mr. Akash Mondol for their auspicious technical support to make our program remarkable. We are also grateful to all the faculty members of Taradevi Harakchand Kankaria Jain College for their honorable presence to make such success. We also express our thanks to all the support staff and office staff, and we are unable to conduct such a glorious national webinar without their help. And lastly, we, Department of Economics of THK Jain College, want to express our heartiest thanks to all the participants from the different parts of India. And lastly, please note for the feedback and the e-certificate, those who are listening in YouTube live streaming, please write down your name and the email ID in your live chat box. And feedback form link will be provided to all the registered mail ID. After successful submission of your feedback form, you will get the e-certificate to your registered mail ID in couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Very
Thank you, madam.
wonderful.
We enjoyed
It was a very, and I really hope that we have some. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
It was really wonderful. I mean, you went forward 8 years.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm not from this, but I could understand.
Very interesting
All
session,
of
sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir. Thank you, madam, also. You will go for the next.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Feedback, sir.